The rain had soaked through Mira's secondhand sneakers 2 hours ago, turning her socks into cold, sodden weights that squelched with every step. She barely noticed anymore. The discomfort had become just another layer in the thick blanket of exhaustion that wrapped around her like a shroud, muffling the world into a distant, gray blur. Her shift at the diner had ended at 11, but she'd stayed an extra hour to help close because Sandra had called in sick again, and Mr. Kowalski couldn't afford to hire anyone else. The tips had been decent, at least. $43.62, which she'd counted twice in the staff bathroom before tucking the bills into the zippered pocket of her purse. $43 closer to the impossible number that haunted her dreams and waking hours alike. The hospital billing department had stopped being polite about 3 weeks ago. Now the calls came daily, sometimes twice daily, the voices on the other end shifting from sympathetic to coldly professional to barely concealed hostility. $22,418. That's what it cost for her father to die in a hospital bed instead of at home, for the doctors to try everything they could to save him from the cancer that had eaten through his body like acid. $22,418 that Mira didn't have and would never have, not even if she worked every hour of every day for the next 5 years. The street was mostly empty at this hour, the rain having driven people indoors. Mira walked with her head down, her dark hair plastered to her skull, her thin jacket doing absolutely nothing to keep out the cold. She should catch the bus, she knew, but the fare was $3, and $3 was $3. She could walk the 45 minutes to her studio apartment in Washington Heights. She'd done it before. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't need to check it to know what it was. Another automated reminder about the payment that was now 60 days overdue. Another threat of collections, of legal action, of consequences that felt both terrifying and meaningless at the same time. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. What did legal action even mean when you had nothing to take? They could sue her, could garnish wages she barely earned, could destroy the credit she'd never had in the first place. None of it mattered. Her father was still dead. The bills were still unpaid. And Mira was still drowning, one breath away from going under for the last time. She'd stopped at the corner of Amsterdam Avenue, waiting for the light to change even though no cars were coming. Habit, she supposed, or maybe just the last remnant of a self-preservation instinct that hadn't quite died yet. The rain fell harder, drumming against the pavement with a sound like static, like the white noise that filled her head most days now. That's when she saw the headlights. They appeared suddenly, cutting through the rain like knives, moving fast, too fast for the wet streets. A black car, sleek and expensive, the kind that cost more than most people made in a year. It was beautiful in an abstract way, all clean lines and predatory grace, and it was heading straight toward a figure Mira hadn't noticed before. A man stood in the middle of the street, maybe 20 feet from where she waited. He was looking down at his phone, oblivious to the approaching vehicle, his attention completely absorbed by whatever was on the screen. He wore a dark suit that even from this distance looked expensive, and he stood with the casual confidence of someone who'd never had to worry about $3 bus fares or collection agencies. The car's brakes squealed, a high-pitched shriek that cut through the rain's static. But Mira could see, even in that split second, that it wouldn't be enough. The wet pavement, the speed, the distance, the physics were simple and merciless. The car would hit him. He would die or be seriously injured. And he had no idea because he was staring at his goddamn phone like an idiot. Mira's body moved before her conscious mind caught up. She didn't think about it, didn't weigh the consequences or calculate the odds. There was just the man in the street and the car bearing down on him and her legs pushing her forward with a burst of speed she didn't know she still possessed. Her shoulder connected with his ribs, and she felt the impact jar through her entire body as she shoved him sideways with every ounce of strength she had. Time did something strange then, stretching out like taffy so that she could see every detail with crystalline clarity. The man's phone flying from his hand, spinning through the air in a perfect arc. His eyes, gray, she noticed, pale gray like winter sky, going wide with shock. The ground rushing up to meet them both as they fell in a tangle of limbs. And the car, still coming, its headlights filling her vision like the entrance to some bright, terrible tunnel. The bumper caught her left leg, and suddenly Mira was airborne, weightless, flying through the rain like a broken bird. She had time to think, with an odd sort of detachment, that this was probably going to hurt quite a lot. Then she hit the pavement, and thought became impossible. Pain exploded through her body, white-hot and all-consuming. Her head cracked against the concrete, and stars burst behind her eyes. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but lie there as the rain fell on her face and the pain rolled over her in waves. Voices, distant and muffled, like they were coming from underwater. Running footsteps. Someone shouting. Strong hands touching her, checking for injuries, and she wanted to tell them to be careful, that she couldn't afford a hospital, that she was already drowning in medical debt and this would finish her. But her mouth wouldn't form the words. Then a face appeared above hers, blocking out the rain. The man from the street, the one she'd pushed. Up close, he was striking in a way that had nothing to do with conventional handsomeness and everything to do with the sharp planes of his face, the intensity of those winter-gray eyes, the aura of controlled power that radiated from him like heat. "Don't move," he said, his voice a deep baritone that carried absolute authority. "The ambulance is coming." Mira tried to shake her head, tried to protest, but her body refused to cooperate. The pain in her leg was becoming distant now, replaced by a spreading numbness that she knew wasn't a good sign. Her vision was starting to blur at the edges, darkness creeping in like ink in water. "Why?" the man asked, and there was something in his voice she couldn't identify. Confusion, maybe, or disbelief. "Why did you save me?" It was a good question. Mira wished she had a good answer. But all she could think about was the $43.62 in her purse, and how ambulance rides cost hundreds of dollars, and how she was so tired of fighting against an ocean that just kept pushing her under. "I don't know," she whispered, and then the darkness swallowed her whole. Consciousness returned in fragments, each one sharp-edged and unwelcome. First, sterile smell, that particular combination of disinfectant and suffering that meant only one thing. Hospital. Mira's first coherent thought was a number. Ambulance ride plus emergency room treatment plus God knew what else. Thousands. Tens of thousands, maybe. Second, pain, but distant, muted by whatever drugs they'd pumped into her system. Her left leg throbbed with a deep, bone-level ache. Her head felt stuffed with cotton. Every breath sent twinges through her ribs. Third, voices, low and intense, coming from somewhere near the foot of her bed. "Insane, Dante. You can't just. I can do whatever I want, Marcus. That's the benefit of being who I am. She saved your life by pure chance. That doesn't mean. It wasn't chance." The second voice, the one called Dante, was cold and precise, each word clipped with absolute certainty. She saw the car. She calculated the distance. She made a choice to put herself in danger to save a complete stranger. That means something. It means she's either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Probably both. Then she'll fit right in with the rest of us. Mira forced her eyes open, squinting against the harsh fluorescent lights. The hospital room swam into focus, generic and depressing in the way all hospital rooms were. But it was a private room, she noticed with growing alarm. Not a curtained-off section of the ER, but an actual private room with its own bathroom and a window showing the gray light of dawn. Private rooms cost extra. Two men stood at the foot of her bed, both wearing expensive suits that looked only slightly rumpled. One was broad-shouldered and built like a linebacker, with dark skin and intelligent eyes that assessed her with the professional wariness of a bodyguard. The other was the man from the street. He looked different in proper lighting, no rain streaming down his face, no shock in his expression. His dark hair was swept back from a face that was all sharp angles and aristocratic lines. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored to a body that suggested both gym-honed strength and the kind of natural athleticism that came from growing up fighting. He wore a black dress shirt underneath, no tie, the top button undone in a way that should have looked casual but somehow only emphasized the coiled tension in his posture. But it was his eyes that held her. Pale gray, almost colorless in the harsh hospital light, fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He was looking at her the way a collector might look at a rare artifact, something valuable and unexpected that had fallen into his hands. "You're awake," he said, and it wasn't a question. He moved around the side of the bed with fluid grace, his expensive shoes silent on the linoleum floor. "How do you feel?" "Like I got hit by a car," Mira rasped, her throat dry and aching. "Which I did." "How bad is it?" "Fractured tibia, mild concussion, 3 bruised ribs, and a collection of contusions that will be turning interesting colors over the next few days." He recited the injuries with clinical precision. "You'll need surgery on the leg, a plate and some screws to stabilize the break. The doctor wants to keep you for observation for at least 48 hours. Each word was a nail in Mira's coffin, sealing her financial doom. Surgery. Plates and screws. 48 hours in a private room. She'd be paying this off for the rest of her life, working until she died at whatever menial job would still employ someone crushed under the weight of medical debt. I can't afford this, she said bluntly, because there was no point in pretending otherwise. I need to leave. I need to sign out AMA or whatever it's called. Against medical advice, the broad-shouldered man supplied. And that would be a terrible idea given your injuries. I don't care. I can't, Myra's voice cracked, and she hated herself for it, hated the tears that burned behind her eyes. I already owe $22,000 in medical bills. I can't add to that. I can't. You won't. The gray-eyed man's voice cut through her rising panic with absolute certainty. I'm covering all of your medical expenses. Past and present. Mira stared at him, certain she'd misheard. What? Your hospital bills. All of them, including the debt from your father's treatment. I'm taking care of it. He pulled his phone from his pocket, scrolling through something with quick efficiency. St. Luke's Hospital, correct? The billing department has already been contacted. Your account is being settled as we speak. The words didn't make sense. They were too big, too impossible, like someone had suddenly announced that gravity was optional or that the sky was actually green. You can't, that's not, why would you do that? Because you saved my life. He said it simply, as if this was a logical transaction, a reasonable exchange of value. I pay my debts. But $22,000 is nothing. He cut her off, his tone making it clear this wasn't up for debate. It's a rounding error in my monthly expenses. And that's before we even discuss your current medical care, which will add another $15,000 to $20,000 once the surgery and hospital stay are factored in. All of it handled. You don't need to worry about any of it. Mira felt like she was drowning again, but this time in disbelief instead of debt. Who are you? Something that might have been a smile touched the corner of his mouth. My name is Dante Vitali. And you are? Mira. Mira Chin. She studied his face, looking for the catch, the angle, the hidden price tag attached to his impossible generosity. Why are you really doing this? I told you. Nobody pays off $40,000 in medical debt just because someone pushed them out of the way of a car, Mira interrupted. That's not how the world works. So what do you want? What's this going to cost me? Dante tilted his head slightly, regarding her with what looked like approval. Smart. You're right to be suspicious. But the answer is going to disappoint you. I don't want anything from you. Well, he paused, that's not entirely accurate. I'd like to know why you did it. Why you threw yourself in front of a moving vehicle to save a stranger. I don't know, Mira said, and it was the truth. I saw you standing there, saw the car coming, and I just moved. I didn't think about it. Instinct, the broad-shouldered man said from his position by the door. Some people freeze. Some people run away. And some people run toward the danger. Marcus is right, Dante said. What you did was either incredibly brave or incredibly reckless. Given your financial situation, I'm leaning toward brave. You had every reason to look the other way, to prioritize your own survival. But you didn't. Mira wanted to argue, to explain that it wasn't bravery, that it was just exhaustion and muscle memory and the kind of broken self-preservation instinct that came from being too tired to care anymore. But the words wouldn't come. Because maybe, in some small way, choosing to save someone else had been the first real choice she'd made in months. The first time she'd acted instead of just reacting to the endless cascade of bills and obligations and failures. The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning, Dante continued, his tone shifting back to business. Best orthopedic surgeon in the city. You'll have a private room for recovery, physical therapy arranged, and pain management that will actually manage your pain. He pulled out a business card, setting it on the bedside table. This is my personal number. If you need anything at all, you call me directly. Mira picked up the card with trembling fingers. Heavy stock, embossed lettering. Dante Vitali, CEO, Vitali Enterprises. The address was in Midtown, one of those glass towers where the rent for a single floor probably exceeded her entire lifetime earnings. What kind of business, she asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew the answer. The kind that requires I walk around with personal security, Dante said dryly, glancing at Marcus. Import, export, investments, real estate. Various ventures that fall into gray areas of legality. You mean you're a criminal? I mean I operate in spaces where the law is flexible. His gray eyes held hers without flinching. I won't lie to you, Mira. My business involves things that would make you uncomfortable. But I follow certain codes, certain principles that are non-negotiable. Women and children are protected, always. Debts are paid, always. And when someone saves my life, I repay that debt in full. There was something almost hypnotic about his certainty, the absolute conviction in his voice. Mira had spent so long swimming in a world of uncertainty, of maybe and possibly and we'll see, that Dante's definitiveness was like solid ground appearing beneath her feet. I don't know how to process this, she admitted quietly. You don't have to process anything right now, Dante said, his voice gentling slightly. You need to rest and heal. Everything else can wait. A nurse appeared in the doorway, her expression professional but with an edge of nervousness as she glanced at Dante and Marcus. I'm sorry, but visiting hours. We're leaving, Dante said smoothly, moving toward the door. He paused at the threshold, looking back at Mira. Get some rest. I'll be back tomorrow after your surgery. You don't have to do that, Mira said quickly. I know. The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been a smile. I'm doing it anyway. Then he was gone, Marcus following close behind, leaving Mira alone in her impossibly expensive private room with a business card that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds and a head full of questions that had no good answers. She looked at the card again, running her thumb over the embossed lettering. Dante Vitali. The name meant nothing to her, but she had a feeling that was about to change. That everything was about to change, had already changed in the moment she'd thrown herself in front of that car. Mira closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling at her like an undertow. Tomorrow she'd have surgery. Tomorrow Dante would return. Tomorrow she'd have to figure out what it meant to be saved by someone like him, and what obligations came with that salvation. But tonight, for the first time in months, she let herself feel something she'd almost forgotten existed, hope. Fragile and frightening, but real. The surgery went better than expected, according to Dr. Reeves, the orthopedic surgeon who looked young enough to be fresh out of medical school but spoke with the confidence of someone who performed this procedure hundreds of times. Mira woke from anesthesia to find her left leg encased in a cast from ankle to mid-thigh, elevated on pillows, and throbbing with a pain that the foredrip of medication was only partially managing. And Dante Vitali sitting in the chair beside her bed, reading something on his tablet with the focused intensity of a man who gave his full attention to everything he did. He looked up immediately when her breathing changed, setting the tablet aside and leaning forward slightly. How do you feel? Like someone put screws in my leg, Mira said, her voice rough from the breathing tube they'd used during surgery. Which they did, apparently. 3 screws and a titanium plate, Dante confirmed. Dr. Reeves says you should have full mobility once it heals, though you'll need physical therapy. I've already arranged for the best therapist in the city to work with you. Of course you have. Mira tried to shift position and immediately regretted it as pain lanced through her leg. Do you always just fix everything for people? No. Dante's expression was unreadable. Only for people who've earned it. I pushed you out of the way of a car. That's not exactly. You risked your life for a stranger, Dante interrupted quietly. You were already drowning in debt, already exhausted, already at the breaking point. And you still chose to save me. That's not nothing, Mira. That's everything. There was something in his voice, some undercurrent of emotion that she couldn't quite identify. Mira studied his face, taking in the sharp lines, the intensity of those pale gray eyes, the way he held himself with absolute control even while sitting still. He was dangerous, she realized. Not in the way Derek Patterson had been dangerous to Lauren in the story she'd heard whispered in the diner's break room, not violent or unpredictable. But dangerous in the way that powerful things were dangerous. Like standing too close to a fire or swimming in deep water. Tell me about yourself, Dante said, as if he'd sensed her analysis and wanted to redirect it. Beyond the medical bills and the 3 jobs. Who is Mira Chin? Nobody important, Mira said automatically, then winced at how pathetic that sounded. I mean, I'm just. I work. I pay bills. Or I try to. There's not much else to tell. I don't believe that. Dante's gaze was penetrating. Everyone has a story. What did you want to be before life got in the way? The question caught her off guard, striking at something she hadn't let herself think about in years. A teacher, she heard herself say. Elementary school. I was 2 semesters away from finishing my degree when my dad got sick. The bills started piling up, and I had to drop out to work full-time. That was 3 years ago. And you never went back. Couldn't afford to. Student loans plus medical debt plus rent. Mira shook her head. The math doesn't work. It never worked. Dante was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Then he pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, and set it aside. What if the math did work? What if you could finish your degree? That's not. Mira stopped, seeing something in his face that made her heart race. What did you just do? Made a phone call. Well, sent a text. My assistant is very efficient. Dante's tone was casual, but his eyes were intent on her reaction. I'm going to pay off your student loans. All of them. And I'm going to establish a fund that will cover your living expenses while you complete your degree. You can quit your jobs, focus on school, and actually become the teacher you were meant to be. The words hit Mira like a physical blow. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what he was saying. You can't just, that's insane. How much money are we even talking about? Does it matter? Dante asked. Yes. Of course it matters. You don't even know me. I know you threw yourself in front of a car to save my life, Dante said, his voice taking on that edge of absolute certainty again. I know you've been working yourself to death trying to pay debts that weren't your responsibility. I know you're brave and selfless and you deserve a chance at the life you wanted before everything fell apart. That's enough. It's not enough, Mira protested, tears burning in her eyes. You can't just decide to fix my entire life because of one moment. That's not how this works. Why not? Dante leaned forward, his intensity almost overwhelming. I have resources you can't imagine, Mira. Money that means nothing to me individually but could change your entire existence. Why shouldn't I use that power to help someone who actually deserves it? Because people don't just do that, Mira said desperately. There's always a price. Always something they want in return. Then let me be clear about what I want. Dante held her gaze, something shifting in his expression. I want you to finish your degree. I want you to become a teacher. I want you to have the life you should have had. And in return, I want to know that the woman who saved my life isn't destroying herself anymore. That's not a fair trade. Life isn't fair, Dante said simply. But sometimes, if we're very lucky, we get a chance to make it a little more balanced. You saved my life, Mira. Let me save yours. A knock on the door interrupted whatever Mira might have said. A woman in her 50s entered, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing a smile that was professionally warm. Mr. Vitali, I have the documents you requested. Thank you, Catherine. Dante took the portfolio and dismissed her with a nod. He opened it, revealing several documents with sticky tabs marking signature lines. These are non-disclosure agreements. Standard in my business. If you agree to let me help you, you'll need to sign them. What you learn about me, about my business, about the people I associate with, it stays confidential. Can you agree to that? Mira stared at the documents, reality crashing back in. This is really happening. You're really serious about all of this? Completely serious. Dante's expression was solemn. I understand this is overwhelming. If you need time to think. No. The word came out before Mira could stop it. She looked at her leg in its cast, thought about the $43.62 in her purse, thought about the endless treadmill of work and debt and exhaustion that had been her life. And she thought about standing in front of that elementary school classroom, teaching kids to read, making a difference in ways that actually mattered. No, I don't need time. I just need a pen. Something flashed across Dante's face, satisfaction, maybe, or relief, or something deeper that she couldn't name. He handed her an expensive fountain pen, and Mira signed her name on each sticky tab, her signature shaky but determined. There's one more thing, Dante said as she signed the last document. Your apartment in Washington Heights. I'm assuming it's not exactly ideal. Mira laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. It's a studio the size of a closet with water damage and a radiator that only works when it feels like it. Why? Because I own a building in the Upper West Side. Recently renovated, security-controlled access, doorman, the works. There's a 2-bedroom apartment available on the 4th floor. Rent-free, for as long as you need it. Dante. You'll need space to study, he continued as if she hadn't spoken. A proper desk, good lighting, somewhere quiet. And you'll need to be somewhere safe while you recover from your injury. The building has an elevator, which your current walk-up doesn't. It's practical. It's insane, Mira said, but there was no real protest in her voice anymore. She was too overwhelmed, too exhausted, too desperate to fight against someone who seemed determined to rescue her. "You're insane." "Probably," Dante agreed, and this time his smile was genuine, transforming his face into something almost warm. "But I've found that the best decisions are usually the ones that seem crazy at first." The apartment was everything Dante had promised and more. Mira stood in the center of the living room 2 weeks after her surgery, leaning heavily on the crutches that would be her constant companions for the next month, and tried to comprehend that this space was hers. Hardwood floors gleamed in the afternoon sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. The living room flowed into an open kitchen with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances that looked like they'd never been used. Down a short hallway, she'd found 2 bedrooms, one already furnished with a bed, dresser, and nightstands, the other set up as an office with a desk, ergonomic chair, and bookshelves waiting to be filled. "It's too much," she said for what felt like the 100th time. Marcus, who'd been assigned to help her move what few possessions she had from her old apartment, just shook his head. "You'll get used to it. Boss doesn't do anything halfway. I've noticed." Mira hobbled over to the windows, looking out at the view of the street below. Real trees lined the sidewalk. People walked dogs. A coffee shop on the corner looked warm and inviting. It was like a different planet from Washington Heights. "Where is he?" "Dante, I mean. He said he'd be here. Business meeting ran long. He'll be by later." Marcus set down the last box. There were only 4 total, a depressing testament to how little she'd accumulated in 26 years. "You need anything before I go?" "Groceries." "The kitchen's stocked, but if there's anything specific." "You stocked the kitchen." "Boss's orders. Figured you'd need food that wasn't hospital cafeteria quality." Marcus moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I've worked for Dante Vitale for 8 years. I've seen him do a lot of things, some of them questionable. But I've never seen him take an interest in someone like this. You saved his life, yeah, but it's more than that. He sees something in you." "What does he see?" Mira asked quietly. Marcus considered this. "Someone worth saving back, I think. Someone who reminds him why the work matters." He left before Mira could ask what that meant, leaving her alone in her impossible new apartment with its gleaming floors and empty bookshelves and the kind of quiet that came from actual soundproofing instead of just luck. Mira made her way to the office, lowering herself carefully into the desk chair. Her leg ached. It always ached now, a constant reminder of the night that had changed everything. On the desk, she found a laptop, still in its box, with a note in precise handwriting. "You'll need this for school. Password is your choice. Everything's been set up for remote access to the university systems. Classes start in 2 weeks. You can do this." 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, she'd be back in school, working toward the degree she'd given up on. The degree that would let her become a teacher, let her make the kind of difference she'd dreamed about before life had beaten those dreams into submission. Mira opened the laptop box with shaking hands, her vision blurring with tears. She didn't deserve this. Didn't deserve any of this. But Dante had decided she did, and apparently when Dante Vitale decided something, the universe rearranged itself to accommodate him. She was setting up the laptop when the doorbell rang. Mira grabbed her crutches and made her way to the door, checking the video intercom, another luxury she was still getting used to, before opening it. Dante stood in the hallway, wearing a dark gray suit that probably cost more than a semester's tuition, holding a bag from what looked like an expensive restaurant. "I brought dinner," he said. "I figured you probably haven't eaten yet, and you shouldn't be trying to cook on crutches. You didn't have to do that." But Mira stepped aside to let him in, watching as he moved through the apartment with the confidence of someone who owned it. Which he did, she reminded herself. He owned this building, owned this apartment, owned basically everything in her life now. The thought should have been terrifying. Instead, it was just strange. "How's the leg?" Dante asked, setting the food bag on the kitchen island and pulling out containers that smelled incredible. "Hurts. But Dr. Reeves says that's normal. Physical therapy starts next week." Mira maneuvered herself onto one of the bar stools, accepting the plate Dante handed her. Some kind of pasta with vegetables and grilled chicken, nothing too heavy. He'd remembered her mentioning that rich food made her nauseous while on pain medication. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Mira worked up the courage to ask the question that had been nagging at her. "Why were you in the street that night? Looking at your phone in the rain at midnight?" Dante's expression clouded slightly. "I just finished a difficult meeting. Someone I trusted had betrayed that trust, stolen from me, put my people at risk. I was distracted, angry, not paying attention the way I should have been. He met her eyes. If you hadn't pushed me out of the way, I would have died. Or at minimum, been seriously injured. And in my world, showing weakness like that can be fatal in other ways. Your world, Mira repeated. You keep saying that. What exactly is your world, Dante? He set down his fork, giving her his full attention. Do you really want to know? I think I need to know. If I'm going to accept all of this, she gestured around the apartment, I should understand what I'm accepting it from. Dante nodded slowly. Fair enough. What do you know about organized crime in New York? Not much. What I've seen in movies, I guess. Most of what you've seen in movies is either exaggerated or completely wrong, Dante said. But the basic structure is accurate. There are families, organizations that control various territories and business interests. Some of those interests are legal. Many aren't. I run one of those organizations. You're a mob boss, Mira said, the words feeling surreal coming out of her mouth. That's the colloquial term, yes. Though I prefer to think of myself as a businessman who operates in markets the law has failed to properly regulate. He smiled slightly at her expression. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, Mira. I do things that are illegal. I hurt people who threaten my organization or violate our codes. I make money from activities that would horrify most people. But I also follow strict rules. No drugs sold near schools. No human trafficking. No harm to women or children, ever. Those are lines I don't cross. Mira absorbed this, trying to reconcile the man sitting across from her, bringing her dinner, making sure she had everything she needed, with someone who casually admitted to hurting people. And Marcus. The others I've seen around. My people. Security, mostly, but also advisors, associates, employees in my various legitimate businesses. I employ about 200 people directly, and several thousand more indirectly through companies I own or control. Dante leaned back slightly, watching her reaction. I'm telling you this because you deserve to know the truth. If you want to walk away, refuse my help, go back to your old life, I'll understand. But you need to make that decision with full information. What happens if I do walk away? Mira asked. If I say thank you but no thank you, I can't be involved with someone like you. Then I make sure your medical bills are still paid, your student loans are still cleared, and you're set up in a safe apartment somewhere. Not this one, obviously, but somewhere decent. You'd start school with a clean slate financially. His gray eyes held hers steadily. I don't take back help once it's given, Mira. Your debt to me, such as it is, was paid the moment you pushed me out of the way of that car. Everything else is a gift, freely given, with no strings attached. Except the NDA. Except the NDA, he agreed. What you learn about my business stays confidential, regardless of whether you stay in my life or not. That's non-negotiable. Mira thought about this, turning it over in her mind. She should run. Should thank him politely and disappear into whatever normal life he was offering. Should stay as far away as possible from a man who admitted to doing illegal things and hurting people. But she kept coming back to the same thought. Dante Vitali had been nothing but honest with her. He could have lied, could have hidden what he was, could have presented himself as some legitimate businessman and let her find out the truth later when it was too late. Instead, he'd laid it all out clearly, giving her the choice. And that choice, that respect for her agency, meant something. I'm not walking away, Mira said quietly. Something shifted in Dante's expression, relief, satisfaction, something deeper and more complicated. You're sure? I'm terrified, Mira admitted. But I'm also curious. You're not what I expected. Any of this is not what I expected. And I think, she paused, choosing her words carefully, I think maybe sometimes the right thing looks like the wrong thing because we've been taught to fear anything that doesn't fit the normal pattern. That's very philosophical for someone on pain medication, Dante said, and there was genuine warmth in his smile now. The pills make me honest, Mira said, returning the smile despite herself. Fair warning. They finished dinner, the conversation shifting to lighter topics, her classes, the logistics of physical therapy, the coffee shop on the corner that Dante assured her had the best espresso in the neighborhood. It felt normal, almost like a date, if dates involved confessing to organized crime and life-altering financial arrangements. As Dante was leaving, he paused at the door. There's one more thing you should know. The man who betrayed me, the reason I was distracted that night, he's still out there. Still angry that I discovered his theft. There's a chance he might try to retaliate, to hurt people I care about as a way of getting to me. And you care about me, Mira said, understanding where this was going. More than I probably should, given how recently we met. Dante's honesty was almost brutal. Which means you could become a target. I've assigned security, Marcus and a few others, very discreet. You won't see them most of the time, but they're there. Is that acceptable? Mira wanted to say no, wanted to insist she didn't need protection, that this was all too much. But she remembered Dante's description of his world, the reality that showing weakness could be fatal. If being connected to him, even tangentially, put her at risk, then accepting protection wasn't weakness. It was just smart. Okay, she said. But they have to be actually discreet. I don't want to feel like I'm under surveillance. You won't even know they're there, Dante promised. He hesitated, then reached out and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture startlingly intimate. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for being worth trusting, Mira replied. After he left, Mira stood at the window for a long time, watching the street below. Somewhere out there, invisible but present, Dante's people were watching, protecting, making sure she was safe. It should have felt claustrophobic. Instead, it felt like the opposite of drowning. It felt like someone had finally taught her how to swim. The first week of classes was harder than Mira expected. Not academically, she'd always been a good student, but physically. Navigating campus on crutches, sitting through 3-hour lectures with her leg elevated, managing the pain medication schedule around her class times. By Friday afternoon, she was exhausted and questioning whether she'd made the right decision trying to jump back into full-time student life. She was struggling with her crutches and her backpack, trying to open the building's front door, when someone materialized beside her and held it open. Not Marcus, but another man she recognized from her first day in the apartment, younger, maybe early 30s, with an easygoing smile that didn't quite hide the alertness in his eyes. Miss Chen, he said pleasantly. Let me help you with that. I'm fine, Mira started to protest, then sighed. Okay, I'm not fine. Thank you. Tony, he introduced himself, taking her backpack and carrying it to the elevator. I'm part of your security detail. Mr. Vitali thought you might need an extra hand on campus. He's very thorough. He's very protective of people he cares about, Tony corrected. There's a difference. In the elevator, Mira studied Tony's profile. Can I ask you something? About Dante, I mean. You can ask. Whether I answer depends on the question. Is he always like this? The helping, the fixing everything, the overwhelming generosity. Tony considered this. With people he believes in. Yes. But he doesn't believe in many people. Most people disappoint him eventually, they're greedy or disloyal or they see his generosity as weakness to exploit. He looked at her directly. But you? You jumped in front of a car for him without knowing who he was or what you'd get out of it. That's not something he's going to forget. The elevator opened on her floor, and Tony carried her bag to her door, waiting while she unlocked it. Before leaving, he said, he's coming by tomorrow around noon. Something about helping you with a research project. Mira had mentioned needing to visit the library for research on her child development class. Of course Dante had remembered. Of course he was making time despite whatever else he had going on. Of course he is, she said aloud, shaking her head. Tony grinned. Get used to it. Once the boss decides you're his to protect, there's no halfway. His to protect. The phrase echoed in Mira's head as she made her way inside, dropping her backpack on the couch and collapsing beside it. She should probably be more concerned about that possessive phrasing, about the implications of being claimed by someone like Dante Vitali. But all she could think about was the warmth that had spread through her chest at the words. Not fear or concern, but something dangerously close to anticipation. She was in trouble, Mira realized. Not from external threats or Dante's enemies. From something much more dangerous, she was starting to fall for the man who'd saved her back. The research trip to the library never happened. Mira woke Saturday morning to her phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. Not Dante's number, but Marcus's. She answered groggily, still half asleep, her leg aching despite the medication she'd taken before bed. Miss Chen, stay in your apartment and away from the windows. Marcus's voice was clipped, professional, but she could hear the tension underneath. We have a situation. Mira sat up too quickly, sending pain shooting through her leg. What kind of situation? The kind that requires you to do exactly what I say. Lock your door, stay low, and wait for instructions. Tony's in the hallway outside your apartment. You're safe, but we need you to stay put. The call ended before Mira could ask more questions. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she grabbed her crutches and made her way to the front door, checking the video intercom. Sure enough, Tony stood in the hallway, his casual demeanor from yesterday replaced with something harder, more alert. He wore a jacket despite the warm weather, and she could see the bulk of a weapon underneath. This was real. Whatever danger Dante had warned her about, it wasn't theoretical anymore. Mira's phone buzzed again. This time it was Dante. Are you alright? His voice was tight with controlled urgency. I'm fine. Marcus called, said to stay inside. What's happening? Vincent Romano, the man who betrayed me, he's made his move. He's been watching you, Mira. We found surveillance equipment in the building across from yours, photographs of you going to classes, detailed schedules of your movements. Dante's voice was cold with fury. He was planning to take you, to use you as leverage against me. The words hit Mira like ice water. Planning. As in past tense. We intercepted his team 20 minutes ago. 4 men, heavily armed, with equipment for a kidnapping. They're being handled as we speak. There was a pause, and when Dante spoke again, his voice was softer. I'm so sorry, Mira. I knew there was risk, but I underestimated how quickly he'd move. You caught them before they could do anything, Mira said, forcing her voice to stay steady even as her hands shook. That's what matters. It matters that you were in danger at all. That I put you in danger by involving you in my life. I involved myself, Mira corrected. I jumped in front of that car, remember? You didn't ask me to do that. No, but I asked you to stay. I asked you to let me help you. I made you a target. The self-recrimination in his voice was striking. This was a man who was used to being in control, used to protecting the people under his care. Having that protection compromised clearly ate at him. Where are you? Mira asked. Dealing with Romano. Making sure he understands that touching you, threatening you, even thinking about you is off limits permanently. There was something in the way he said dealing with that made Mira's stomach clench. Dante, what are you going to do? What needs to be done? His voice was flat, emotionless. Go back to bed, Mira. Try to rest. I'll come by this evening to explain everything. Dante. But he'd already hung up. Mira stood in the middle of her living room, crutches digging into her armpits, trying to process what had just happened. Someone had been watching her. Planning to kidnap her. Use her as a weapon against Dante. And now Dante was dealing with the situation in whatever way men like him dealt with threats. She should be terrified. Should be packing her bags and running as far from this world as she could get. But instead, she found herself thinking about Dante's voice, the way it had roughened with concern when he asked if she was all right. The fury underneath his controlled tone when he talked about Romano watching her. He cared. More than cared, if she was being honest with herself. And somewhere in the past few weeks, between the hospital visits and the dinner conversations and the small kindnesses that seemed to come so naturally to him, she'd started caring back. Which meant she was invested now, whether she wanted to be or not. Invested in Dante's world, in his safety, in whatever came next. Mira made her way to the kitchen, started coffee with shaking hands, and settled in to wait. Dante arrived at 8 that evening, looking more exhausted than Mira had ever seen him. His suit jacket was gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up, and there was a tension in his shoulders that spoke of hours of stress and difficult decisions. Marcus and Tony flanked him, both carrying the same alert wariness they'd had all day. Kitchen, Dante said shortly. We need to talk. Mira had been expecting this, had spent the entire day preparing herself for whatever he was going to say. She'd made tea, had cups ready, something to do with her hands while he explained why she needed to disappear from his life for her own safety. But Dante didn't sit down. He paced the length of the kitchen like a caged animal, running his hands through his hair and disrupting its usual perfect order. Marcus and Tony stationed themselves near the door, giving them privacy but remaining within earshot. Romano's dealt with, Dante said finally, stopping his pacing to face her. He won't be a threat to you or anyone else anymore. What does dealt with mean? Mira asked quietly. It means he's on a plane to Sicily with instructions never to return to the United States. It means every asset he had in this city is now mine. It means everyone who works for him now works for me, and they understand that you are completely off limits. Dante's gray eyes were intense, almost feverish. It means I've made it clear to every organization in this city that Mira Chin is under my personal protection, and anyone who touches you answers to me directly. Mira absorbed this. You're telling everyone I belong to you. I'm telling everyone you're protected by me. There's a difference. Is there? Mira challenged. Because it sounds like you just claimed ownership of me to every mob boss in New York. I claimed responsibility, Dante corrected sharply. I made it clear that your safety is my priority, that threats to you are threats to me. In my world, that's the highest level of protection I can offer. I didn't ask for that. You didn't have to. Dante crossed to where she sat, crouching down so they were eye level. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his face, the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. Do you understand what would have happened if Romano's men had succeeded? They would have taken you, hurt you, used you to force me into making concessions that would have gotten good people killed. And then, once they had what they wanted, they would have killed you anyway because you'd seen too much, knew too much. But they didn't succeed, Mira said, her voice steadier than she felt. Because you stopped them. This time. But there will be others, Mira. There are always others. Men who see vulnerability and exploit it, who look for weaknesses in my armor and press on them until something breaks. He reached out, his hand cupping her face with surprising gentleness. I won't let you be that weakness. Which means I need to make you something else. What else is there? Strength. Dante's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. I need to make it clear that you're not a vulnerability to exploit, but an asset to protect. That anyone who harms you brings down the full weight of my organization on their heads. It's the only way to keep you safe. Mira leaned into his touch without meaning to, her body responding to his proximity in ways her brain was still trying to catch up to. And what do I become in the process? Your property. Your possession. My partner, Dante said quietly. If you'll have me. The words hung between them, weighted with implications that went far beyond simple protection. Mira stared at him, seeing the vulnerability beneath his usual control, the fear that she might say no. We barely know each other, she whispered. I know you jumped in front of a car to save a stranger. I know you work yourself to exhaustion trying to pay debts that weren't your responsibility. I know you're brilliant and brave and stubborn enough to argue with me when most people are too afraid to even look me in the eye. Dante's hand slid to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair. I know that somewhere in the past few weeks, you became the most important thing in my world. And I know that losing you would break something in me that I didn't even know could still break. Dante. I'm not asking you to love me, he interrupted. Not yet. I'm asking you to give this a chance. To let me protect you properly, to let me, he paused, seeming to struggle with the words, to let me be yours as much as you're mine. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Mira's heart was racing, her breath coming short. This was insane. She'd known him for less than a month. He was a criminal, someone who operated outside the law, who hurt people and controlled territories and did things that should terrify her. But when she looked at him, all she could see was the man who'd paid her impossible debts, who brought her dinner and made sure she had everything she needed, who looked at her like she was something precious and irreplaceable. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I, Dante replied, and the honesty in his voice made something in her chest crack open. I'm terrified that I'll fail to protect you, that my world will consume you, that you'll realize what I am and run. But I'm more terrified of not trying. Mira reached up, her hand covering his where it rested against her neck. If we do this, if I say yes, what does that mean? Practically. It means you stay here, in this apartment, with enhanced security. It means you finish your degree under my protection. It means we figure out what this is between us without the pressure of you having to worry about money or safety or anything except your own happiness. Dante's expression was intense. And it means that when you're ready, if you're ready, we see where this goes. No pressure, Mira said dryly. All the pressure in the world, Dante corrected. But only the kind you put on yourself. I'm not going to force anything, Mira. You set the pace. You decide what you're comfortable with. I'm just asking for the chance to prove I'm worth the risk. Mira thought about her old life, the endless grind of work and debt and exhaustion. Thought about the future Dante had given her, school and stability and possibility she'd stopped letting herself imagine. And she thought about the way her pulse quickened when he walked into a room, the way his rare smiles made her feel like she'd won something precious, the way his touch made her skin sing. Okay, she heard herself say. Okay, we'll try this. But Dante, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Don't lie to me. Don't hide things to protect me. If there's danger, if something's wrong, I need to know. I can't be your partner if you treat me like I'm made of glass. Something shifted in Dante's expression, respect, maybe, or recognition. I promise. No lies, no hiding. You're strong enough to handle the truth. Then kiss me, Mira said, the words escaping before she could second-guess them. Because if we're doing this, I want to know what I'm getting into. Dante's smile was slow and devastating. He leaned in, his other hand coming up to frame her face, and kissed her with a thoroughness that made her forget about her injured leg, about the danger, about everything except the taste of him and the way his hands felt cradling her face like she was something infinitely precious. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. I'm going to keep you safe, he murmured. Whatever it takes. I know, Mira replied. And the terrifying thing was, she believed him. The next 3 months passed in a blur of normalcy punctuated by moments that reminded Mira exactly what world she'd entered. Classes consumed most of her days. Her leg healed slowly but surely, graduating from crutches to a walking boot to finally, blessedly, nothing at all. She excelled in her coursework, rediscovering the joy of learning that had been buried under years of survival mode. Her professors praised her insights on child development theory, and she found herself actually excited about the future for the first time in years. Dante visited regularly, fitting himself into her life with surprising ease. They had dinner together at least 3 times a week, sometimes at her apartment, sometimes at his penthouse, occasionally at restaurants where the staff seemed to know him and treated him with a mixture of respect and carefully concealed fear. He helped her study, reading from her textbooks in that precise voice of his, asking questions that forced her to think deeper about the material. But there were also the other moments. The night she woke to find Tony and Marcus in her hallway at 3 a.m., dealing with someone who tried to gain access to the building. The morning Dante showed up with a split lip and bruised knuckles that he refused to explain beyond business dispute. The dinner conversation that was interrupted by a phone call that made his expression go cold and hard, and sent him rushing out with barely a goodbye. Each time, he kept his promise. He didn't lie, didn't hide. He told her about the territorial dispute with a rival organization, about the shipment that had been intercepted by federal agents, about the associate who needed to be reminded of proper conduct with extreme prejudice. The details were often vague, couched in euphemism, but the reality underneath was clear. Dante Vitale was exactly what he'd claimed to be, dangerous, powerful, operating in a world where violence was a tool and loyalty was currency. And somehow, impossibly, Mira was falling in love with him. She tried to fight it at first, tried to maintain emotional distance, to remember that this was temporary, that she was just a woman he'd decided to help and that would be the end of it once she finished school and moved on with her life. But Dante made it impossible to maintain that distance. He remembered everything she told him, the names of her professors, the topics of her research papers, her favorite kind of tea. He showed up with books he thought she'd enjoy, with takeout from restaurants she'd mentioned wanting to try. He listened when she talked about her dreams of teaching, asking thoughtful questions and treating her aspirations with the same seriousness he brought to his business dealings. And when he kissed her, which happened more and more frequently, it was with an intensity that made her feel like she was the center of his universe, like nothing else mattered except the two of them and the connection that had formed between them. I'm in trouble, Mira confessed to her reflection one morning, 3 months after that first kiss. I'm completely, totally in trouble. Because she didn't just care about Dante anymore. She loved him. Loved his intensity and his intelligence, his rare smiles and his unexpected gentleness. Loved the way he made her feel safe and challenged and precious all at once. And the terrifying thing was, she was pretty sure he loved her back. The confirmation came on a Thursday evening in late spring. Mira had just finished her last final exam of the semester, officially completing her first full term back in school. She'd aced every class, had been asked by 2 professors to consider graduate school, had received nothing but encouragement and praise for her work. She was celebrating with takeout in her apartment, texting Dante about her exam scores, when he showed up at her door unannounced. He looked different. Not his usual controlled self, but almost nervous. His hair was disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it, and there was an energy about him that Mira had never seen before. Is everything okay? She asked immediately, her mind jumping to threats and danger and all the things that could go wrong in his world. Everything's perfect, Dante said, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. Or it will be, if you say yes. Yes to what? Instead of answering, Dante crossed to where she stood and pulled her into a kiss that was different from all the others they'd shared. Desperate, almost, like he was trying to communicate something words couldn't capture. When he finally pulled back, his hands came up to frame her face, his gray eyes searching hers. "I love you," he said simply. "I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, I know there are 1,000 reasons this shouldn't work. But I love you, Mira Chin. You've become the most important thing in my world, and I can't imagine my life without you in it." Mira's breath caught. She'd known, on some level, but hearing him say it out loud was different. Made it real in a way that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "I love you too," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. "I've been trying not to, but I do. I love you, Dante." The smile that broke across his face was radiant, transforming him into something almost boyish. He kissed her again, and this time there was joy in it, relief, the pure happiness of reciprocated feeling. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Mira's heart stopped. "Dante. I'm not proposing," he said quickly, seeing her panic. "Not yet. Not until you've finished school and had time to really understand what a life with me means. But I wanted you to have this." He opened the box, revealing not a ring but a pendant, a delicate silver disc engraved with an intricate design that Mira recognized as his family crest. "In my world, this means you're mine. It means anyone who sees it knows you're under my protection, that you're family." "Family," Mira repeated, taking the pendant with shaking hands. The silver was warm from being in his pocket, and the weight of it felt significant, like accepting something far more serious than jewelry. "If you wear this, there's no going back," Dante said seriously. "Everyone in my world will know what you mean to me. You'll be a target for my enemies, but also untouchable because of my protection. You'll be part of something that exists outside normal society, with all the benefits and dangers that implies." Mira looked at the pendant, then at Dante's face, seeing the vulnerability there, the fear that she might refuse. She thought about the past 3 months, the happiness she'd found, the future that had opened up before her. Thought about the man who'd saved her life by letting her save his, who'd given her back her dreams and asked for nothing but the chance to be part of them. "Put it on me," she said. The relief in Dante's expression was palpable. His hands were gentle as he fastened the chain around her neck, the pendant settling just above her heart. When he stepped back to look at her, there was something almost reverent in his gaze. "Mine," he said softly. "Yours," Mira agreed. "But Dante, that means you're mine too. All the protection and loyalty and devotion you're offering, it goes both ways. If I'm wearing your crest, you're wearing my heart. Deal?" "Deal," Dante replied, pulling her close again. "Though I think I've been wearing your heart since you threw yourself in front of that car." They spent the evening on her couch, Mira curled against Dante's side, talking about the future in concrete terms for the first time. She'd finish her degree over the next year and a half. After graduation, she'd look for teaching positions, though Dante promised to help her find schools in safe neighborhoods with good security. They'd take things slow, let their relationship develop naturally, but with the understanding that they were building towards something permanent. "I want to marry you," Dante admitted as the evening wound down. "Eventually. When you're ready. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want to build a life with you that's more than just my world, something we create together." "I want that too," Mira said, and realized it was true. Despite the danger, despite the complications, despite everything that should have made this impossible, she wanted a future with Dante Vitali. Wanted to be his partner in every sense of the word. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Dante having finally left around midnight with promises to see her tomorrow, Mira touched the pendant at her throat and smiled. She'd jumped in front of a car to save a stranger, and in the process, had saved herself. Had found not just financial stability or physical safety, but something infinitely more precious, love. Real, complicated, challenging love with a man who saw her clearly and wanted her anyway. The Mafia boss had asked why she'd saved him, and she still didn't have a perfect answer. But maybe that was okay. Maybe some things didn't need explanation. Maybe sometimes you just moved on instinct, threw yourself into danger, and trusted that whatever came next would be worth the risk. And as she fell asleep with Dante's crest warm against her skin and the memory of his kiss still tingling on her lips, Mira knew with absolute certainty that the risk had been worth it. She'd saved him. He'd saved her back. And together, they'd build something stronger than either of them could have created alone. Epilogue, 1 year later. Mira stood in front of her classroom, watching 23 second graders file in from recess, their energy barely contained, their faces bright with excitement for the afternoon's art project. This was her classroom, in a good school in a safe neighborhood, with resources and support and everything she dreamed about back when she was scrubbing floors and drowning in debt. The pendant at her throat caught the light as she moved, and several of the children noticed it like they always did. "Ms. Chen, your necklace is so pretty," Sophia said for the 100th time. "Thank you, Sophia. Now everyone to their seats, please. We have a lot to do this afternoon." Her phone buzzed with a text. Dante, letting her know he'd pick her up after school. They were having dinner at his penthouse, their penthouse now, since she'd officially moved in 3 months ago. Tomorrow was Saturday, and they'd spend it looking at engagement rings, a step they'd both agreed they were ready for. Mira Chin, future wife of Dante Vitali. Future partner to a man who operated in shadows but had given her light. It should have been impossible. Should have been wrong. Instead, it was perfect. She looked at her students, at the future she was helping to shape, and thought about the night that had changed everything. The rain, the car, the split-second decision to save a stranger. "Miss Chin." Tommy raised his hand. "Are you okay? You're smiling really big." "I'm wonderful, Tommy," Mira replied, and it was the truth. "Now, let's talk about colors and what they can tell us about emotions." As she launched into the lesson, her hand unconsciously touched the pendant at her throat. Dante's crest. His protection. His love. She'd thrown herself in front of a car and found salvation. Had saved a life and been saved in return. And every day since had been a gift, complicated and challenging and absolutely worth every risk. The Mafia boss had gotten out of his car and asked, "Why did you save me?" And Mira finally had her answer, because sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is take a leap of faith into the unknown. Sometimes, saving someone else is how you save yourself. And sometimes, just sometimes, the most dangerous man in the city is exactly who you need to feel truly safe. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now, I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.